Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm here with my July wrap-up. It's been a while since I've done a weekly wrap-up, so this is definitely going to be interesting because usually I've already talked about these books for an extended amount of time, but the majority of the books that I have in July, I haven't talked about at all. A couple I have. I did do a vlog at the beginning of the month, so I have actually mentioned a few of these, but for the most part, this is my first time really getting to sit down and talk about any of the books. Okay, so I was actually looking at my list. I decided to write it down. I had a pretty good month for July. The majority of my reads were 4.5s, 4s, a 5. I had one 5, but that's pretty good. And I only had like a couple that I rated 3 and below. So I think I'm actually going to start with the books that I like the least for July, which sounds like a horrible way to start a wrap up, but oh well, we're going to go for it. So my least favorite book of July was Raise by Tilly Cole. And I have come to the realization after reading lots of Tilly Cole that I'm probably not going to pick up another one after having read Lord of London Town, which is something that I'm reading currently in August. But Raise was the first book that I read outside of the Hades Hangman series. And even though I was intrigued by the Hades Hangman series and I definitely liked the first one, but I've just come to the realization that Tilly Cole's writing is just not something that I enjoy overall. And most of her books are misses, with like basically the one exception, It Ain't Me, Babe. And I will get to the other Tilly Cole that I read during the month, which is book 3 of the Hades Hangman series, but let's start off with Raise because I will get off subject and I will go on tangents, and that's why my videos are so long. So Raise, we picked this book in my Patreon. Our patrons voted for dark romance and Raise won. I'd never really heard anything about it, but it is basically about a boy named Raise. He kind of names himself Raise. He was kind of trafficked, and he, from a young age, I think he was 13 or 14, he grew up in this like fight to the death kind of prison type of situation for boys. They were trained to fight and thrown into these death rings where it was kill or be killed, and grown men were basically betting on them. And he also got abused. I think that Tilly Cole just always includes child sexual abuse in her book. I have yet to read a book that did not include some sort of like sexual abuse. Well, maybe that's not true. I don't think that there was a childhood sexual assault scene for Lords of London Town, but every other book, yes. I was never really rooting for the characters other than Raise, and that was only mostly toward the beginning because obviously he didn't choose to be put in that situation. And I found the whole book to be very predictable because when we're introduced to our heroine, she's actually in a relationship with another guy, and he is kind of abusive, but she has been with him for so long that she has convinced herself that she's in love with him. It's really not till the very end that she starts really looking at him like a monster, her current boyfriend. But in the beginning, she's a mafia princess and she's with this guy because he's also kind of the heir to their Bratva mafia in New York. But she had this childhood sweetheart who he died. It's really not that big of a secret in the book. Like Tilly Cole makes it painfully obvious that Raise is the childhood sweetheart. His name is Luca, and he suddenly makes a reappearance in New York, but he has amnesia, so he doesn't remember his life as Luca at all. The only real memory that he has from the past, it's not even a memory, he wrote it on the wall when he was at that childhood prison, is the name of the person who he blames for putting himself in there, and that just so happens to be the heroine's boyfriend's name, Alex, or whatever his name is. I honestly want to blank this book out of my mind at this point, and like New York. So once he escapes from that prison, he just knows that he needs to get himself to New York, and he's to find this guy named Alex, and he also knows his last name, which I have forgotten, and it's really not important. So he shows up there, he ends up by saving the heroine from something, and so they keep continually being thrown in each other's paths, and I just really had a very difficult time with the plot of this book. It just was such a slog to get through. I disliked a lot of the dialogue. It was very cheesy, very corny for the majority of the time, and the heroine was just so terrible. Once we got into the big reveal about like what exactly happened all those years ago, like what happened to Luca and also to the heroine's twin brother who died. And when we discovered the events that happened, I was like, what? It was crazy. It was crazy dumb. And it kind of made me lose respect for the hero as well. So that's why I gave this book 1 star. Like, there was very little redeeming in my eyes about this book. I just could not get behind basically anything. So that's it. And I kind of felt tired of talking about Tilly Cole, but I do have to talk about one more in a little bit. I only had 2 3 stars for the month of July, which is pretty great. And one of them I was very disappointed in because I just thought that I didn't expect it to be a 3-star book. That is Garnet Flats by Devney Perry. And I really love Devney Perry. She doesn't always land in the 4 and 5-star range for me, but for the majority of the time she really does. I still think that her Clifton Forge series is her strongest one overall when you take into account like all the books. The Edens, which this is the 3rd book in the Eden series, the Edens, the only one that I really enjoyed was Indigo Ridge. I was not a huge fan of Juniper Hill, but it's not even a contest. Garnet Flats is the book that I like the least so far. And I was very excited about it because it was set up at the end of Juniper Hill. Tally is one of the Eden siblings, and she's a doctor. She's working in her small town in Montana. And I really like the setup for her character because since her family basically owned like everything in this small town in Montana, she's kind of working to earn her respect as like a doctor, a full-fledged doctor. She's not really getting the respect from her mentor, and it's not because he doesn't respect her, it's that he sees her as the young kid that he's always known her as. So he doesn't even call her doctor. He calls her Tally, like in front of, you know, patients and stuff like that. So it just feels like not very professional. And Tally's really down on herself about that. She's also butting heads with the charge nurse on her floor, but she's the type of character to kind of like hold it all in. She's non-confrontational. She just avoids that. And at the end of Juniper Hill, we have a scene where the book picks up right at that scene where her brother and his wife are at the hospital because she's currently pregnant and they're visiting, and her brother starts talking to this guy while they're waiting for her to be done with work. And this guy just so happens to be a kind of famous MMA fighter named Foster Madden. I think his last name is Madden. It doesn't matter. His name's Foster. And when Talia sees him, she hides. She ducks for cover. She does not want this guy to know that she's there. And her brother's just kind of like, you want to fill me in on like, why are you hiding from Foster Madden? Like, why? Do you know him? Like, where do you know him from? Apparently, in college, she dated Foster for like a whole entire year, and she never told her parents about it. And then something happened, he broke her heart, and now all of a sudden, years later, he is in town and he is looking for her. The reason why this book really didn't work for me is because I felt like Devney Perry was throwing like all the drama into this book. Like, I felt like this book was very overly dramatic. There were so many instances where I felt like the conflict was so overblown, and it was incredibly predictable, and it boggled my mind because I felt like I just expected like so much better, like a more intriguing story. I was very ready to read this second chance romance, and I was wanting to know their history. And once you find out what their history is, I was just kind of like, wow, that's like soap opera level drama, and in a bad way, because not all soap operas are bad, or you know what I'm saying. Like, it was not very entertaining to watch this melodrama play out. I was reading this the first day that I got to Apollycon. Juliet and I had just gotten our hotel room, and we had some leisure time, so we both wanted to finish reading our book. She was still reading The Crush, which I'll talk about in a minute. And I decided to start Garnet Flats, and I'm sitting on the bed and I keep like groaning. I was like, oh, you're so stupid. And Juliet was laughing. She's like, what? So I just had to like vent to her about it because I was really frustrated with the characters. I was really frustrated with the secrets that Foster was keeping. Honestly, it didn't need to play out the way that it did then or now in the present day. I was just very disappointed in this book. So I gave it 3 stars. It was just not what I expected and not what I wanted. So yeah. Then this brings me to Soul and Loon by Catherine Moon. Now, I gave book 2, so this is a 2-parter, it is a duet. I gave book 2 3 stars, but I'm going to talk about both of the books. But my overall consensus, the reason why I gave book 2 a 3-star, and I think I gave book 1 a 4-star, was because I don't think that this needed to be a duet. I think that it very easily could have been one book. And our character Lumen, her estate is kind of situated along the border between two warring countries, and there is this famous general for like the opposite side that all of her like brothers and stuff like died fighting for. There's this famous general named Dominic Westbrook, and he brought his army to her estate. She's the only one left, and she's trying to keep the tradition. She's trying to take care of her tenant farmers, and she's not a priestess, but they call them lunars because they worship, there's like a sun god who is the major god of like her enemies, the enemy country, and her country really worships like the lunar god. And so she wants to keep up those traditions and stuff. But Dominic Westbrook comes with his band of men, and he takes over her home, and he kind of gives her a choice. He's like, well, you can stay in my bed if you want, or the men might pass you around. So it's like your choice if you want to like come in my bed or not. And she does. She walks to his bed like of her own free will. And mostly she struggles with the fact that as the weeks go by and she is sleeping with Dominic, and even though he presents himself to be this like unfeeling, warrior with this bad reputation, he starts to warm to her and starts to listen to her. She asks him to make concessions, and he does. And she starts to kind of hate herself for craving his company and enjoying herself in the bedroom with him. In Catherine Moon fashion, this is a reverse harem. So it's not a reverse harem like I've ever read from Catherine Moon before. All of her other ones are set up very differently from this one, because in this duet, she really is with one person at a time until the very end of book 2. Then she's with all of them. So the main player for book 1 is really Dominic. And then we also have Finn, who is their healer. He's very grumpy. And Gideon, who is the nicest one, the one that she has the best relationship with. And he never really does anything to hurt her. Gideon is like this gentle giant. There's really nothing bad to say about Gideon. He never really fucks up when it comes to Lumen, which is great for her. But yeah, like I said, I feel like the reason why it's so gradual is because Lumen needs to kind of come to terms with she's falling in love with people who should be her enemies. But the pacing is very slow in book 1 and also book 2, and I feel like if they were combined and the pacing was faster and maybe there weren't so many perceived betrayals between them, I think I would have liked the series better. So it's just not my favorite book or series by Catherine Moon. Okay, now for my 3.5s briefly, because I don't want to linger on them too much, but I will talk about one a little bit more in depth because I feel like people will want more of an explanation other than, it was okay for me. I read A Deal with the Devil by Elizabeth O'Rourke. I did give it 3.5 stars. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't, the reason why it didn't blow me away is because I kind of had a difficult time getting on board with the setup of the book. The heroine, Tally, is doing a favor for her best friend who he's traveling with his partner to go adopt a child, and she's really struggling for money at this point. He works as an assistant to this plastic surgeon named Hayes, and apparently Tally hates Hayes, thinks he is the devil. She does accept the position grudgingly, and I just never really understood why she hated him so much. Like, throughout the entire novel, it's set up that they are enemies. Like, this is an enemies to lovers relationship, this love-hate relationship type of thing playing out between them. But I really never understood like what happened in their past history to make her think so badly of him that she just like, he is the devil. The only reasons that I saw to back up Tally's hate of Hayes was the fact that he was a man whore. And that really didn't wash later on, because when she's actually talking to her best friend later on and she's just like, oh, I have to like kick out these women in the morning, and her best friend's kind of like, that's so weird, he hardly ever has women over. And so I'm just kind of like, what is going on? If his normal image is not this playboy who is sleeping with random women all the time, then why does she have that impression of him before she comes to work for him? It's just very weird. I did not understand why he was so devilish in her eyes. So when an enemies to lovers plot does not work, and I don't believe that they are truly enemies, it's just very difficult for me to enjoy like the banter between them, because I feel like the heroine's being unreasonable because you have not proved to me that there is a reason why you should look down on this person or hate this person or be frustrated with them. I just couldn't understand it, okay? But eventually I did really like their relationship when they started getting closer, when they started finding some common ground. We find out, you know, his first impression of her when he saw her and stuff. We get like all this information later on that really endeared me towards them. But then I was very frustrated towards the end. There was a little bit of a conflict towards the end, and it was mostly because she literally refused to kind of put her heart on the line and open up. And later on, it really just takes her friend to nudge her and be like, you kind of made a mistake. And she's like, yeah, I did, didn't I? So that was the reason why it just wasn't a great book for me. It was just an okay book. So 3.5 stars for that. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It's just, it was a little disappointing because I knew that a lot of people liked it. Then I also picked up A Dangerous Kind of Lady by Mia Vinci. Now, I have loved the other 2 books in the series. I read them way out of order. My favorite one is the 3rd one. It's called A Wicked Kind of Husband. And I think they do read very well as standalones. And then I went to the first one, A Beastly Kind of Earl. So I was very excited to pick up the second one, and I started listening to this on audio. I, again, had a very difficult time with the heroine, Arabella. I just did not understand the hate towards the hero. It was kind of like they were childhood frenemies. Arabella was just too much of a prickly heroine to me. And I really did not feel like any emotions towards them as a couple, and that's basically why I gave it 3.5 stars. But I still think that Mia Vinci does some very interesting writing, and she does write some interesting heroines, and I actually like what I see of Arabella in the other books, just not in her own book, which is kind of a little bit sad. Okay, after A Dangerous Kind of Lady, I have one more 3.5 star, and that is Souls Unfractured. And that is the 3rd book in the Hades Hangman series. And I will not be continuing after this. I'm tired of the amount of on-page trauma. It's too much for me. Okay, but Maddie and Flame, like, they're 2 broken souls that feel very alone, and they've gone through so much. They just feel like kindred spirits, and they're the only people in each other's lives that kind of like calms the storm, you know? Maddie has her friends who are very understanding and she loves them, but she has a very hard time being near any other man. But Flame, the most kind of like psychotic one in the Hades Hangman, MC, has always kind of put her at ease, and he's like this pierced, tattooed, raging, killing machine, and she feels safe with him. And I kind of like, I thought that their romance was strangely very sweet, but also it's just getting very repetitive, the trauma that is in both of their past. Like, you had double the trauma for these characters. Flame had lots of awful things that happened in his childhood that we have to read about, and Maddie as well. And honestly, I'm just really, really, really tired of reading on-page childhood sexual assault. It is so graphic. It is so much. We have been reading similar scenes since book 1. It was shocking in book 1 and necessary so that you can, you know, understand the depths and depravity and stuff, but it's become too much for me, so I'm just not gonna read it anymore. I don't need that in my life. So that's it, but I still am glad that Maddie and Flame were like together. Now I'm going to briefly touch on my 4 stars, but not really go into great detail about them. I have Storm Echo by Nalini Singh. I did get an arc of this one, and though I really enjoyed being back in the Psy Changeling world, I feel like this is one of the books that I would say is more forgettable in the Psy Changeling series. And there was one plot point to do with the heroine, Soleil, that I found very awkward. She had this impression of a beloved character in the Psy Changeling series. He's an alpha of one of the packs, and Soleil thought that he committed this atrocity. And you as the reader who have been knowing this alpha for, 18 plus books, you know that he didn't do that. Her assumption that this person is bad and her mission was just kind of like weird to me. I don't know. And she could have asked others for clarification. It wouldn't have been hard for somebody to literally correct her assumptions. It was a weird plot point that it felt very forced. It felt very forced. It was weird. But I did think that they were a cute couple in the end. I mean, I'm not gonna hate a Psy Changeling book. It's a Psy Changeling book. I love those. So it was just not the strongest of the bunch, and I probably won't easily remember this couple and the long lineup of this series. And then I read Throne of the Horde King, which is the final book in Zoe Draven's Horde King series, and I did enjoy it. I thought it was a pretty good wrap up to the series. She does say that she's going to be revisiting it, which I'm excited about because I don't want to leave my beautiful primitive horde kings and their human mates. But this one's a little different because the heroine is not fully human. She's actually half Drakarian and half human. I found that the first half of this book was so much stronger than the second half. The first half was very endearing. It had all the elements that I really loved about the horde kings. It was kind of like an on the road type of romance. It's forced proximity, and I really loved the kind of grumpy sunshine dynamic between them. But then I found that the story really slowed down when they got to the city of Dothic, and we got to this plot point about, you know, the hero being the bastard son of a king and what he was going to do about that, because the king is not a great king. There's also some background about the heroine that I felt like, honestly, the story didn't even need that at all. I felt like that could have just been done away with. And then, you know, the third act conflict between them, it was between the couple itself, and I didn't really love that. So yeah, a couple of things were misses for me and I felt could have been handled a little bit better, but overall, I mean, it was an enjoyable book and I just love The Horde Kings, one of my favorite sci-fi series, and I can't wait to see what Zoe Draven is going to be writing next. I also really enjoyed The One Who Loves You by Pippa Grant. This was something that I put on my TBR because I just really like the premise. Single dad romances always intrigue me. Also, it's kind of like this opposites attract romance between this rich city girl and this small town guy. And Pippa Grant writes some pretty humorous books, and I really like the situational humor that she puts her characters in. This town of Tickled Pink and like the history behind it. This town was put on the map because there was this movie that was filmed there, and Phoebe, who is our heroine, she is the socialite granddaughter of like this billionaire, and she wants to work her way up the corporate ladder in her family's company, and she needs to impress her grandmother, and her grandmother's like the dragon lady. Like, she can never impress her grandmother, and one day she's having dinner with her grandmother, and her grandmother has a near-death experience because she was choking on some meat, and her grandmother watches this movie, and that's set in Tickled Pink, which is a real place in this universe. And she decides that she's a bad person and she needs to do some good works, and what better way than to follow the path of this movie, because the character in that movie found like the pathway to heaven in the book. And so she's like, you know what, we need to go to this town. We need to go to this town just like they did in the movie, and I'm gonna find my way to heaven. We're gonna be better people. And all of her, like her children and her grandchildren are just kind of like, what it has gotten into her. So they all are relocated to this small town, and I really love the shenanigans that go on. I will probably read the second book in the series because Phoebe has this younger sister that I'm kind of intrigued by. So I thought it was really cute. I really loved Teague's relationship with his ex-wife. It was an awesome relationship between them. There was like no hard feelings. His ex-wife is currently remarried and happy with her partner. And I really loved Teague's daughter, transgender daughter. She was really cute, and I thought that the relationship between the daughter and Phoebe was really fun as well. And also Phoebe's younger sister, because she's like one of those influencers that the daughter's kind of like a little obsessed with. So it's pretty funny. It's pretty humorous. And Teague was a wonderful dad. He also lives in a treehouse, which I thought was funny. Anyway, I just really enjoyed it. It was very cute. Now we're gonna get to my favorite ones, my favorites. Okay, so I want to start this off with, it started with A Scandal by Julianne Long. I did talk about this book in a vlog because I was kind of binging some Julianne Long's, the last three in her Pennyroyal Green series. This is like the second to last one. It is such a beautiful book. I just loved it. The heroine, Elise, she is a single mom, and she didn't grow up in the working class, but since she did have a son out of wedlock, it's kind of forced her to make her own way in the world, and she gets a housekeeping job in Philip Lavey's household. He is of French nobility, and he has been at sea for many years. So his house is in disarray in Britain. He's just recently bought this house, and he doesn't even want to like stay there. Like, he would ideally like to go back to France sometime, but he can't. And when Elise is hired on, like, he is such a grump. He is a wounded hero. It's very like Beauty and the Beast vibes. Like, he just like lashes out at her. He's in pain and he doesn't know how to ask for help and stuff. And I love the way that Elise stands up to him. I also really love the way that she kind of like whips his household into shape. She does butt heads with the cook in the house because the cook is just, she's not a great person. And God, I love Elise as a single mom. I loved her little boy, and I love the scenes that we get between Philippe and her son, Jack. Really awesome. I thought the chemistry was insanely hot between them, and it's just amazing. So we're going to do this on the podcast, which I'm excited about. Okay, then I actually had Devney Perry's Calamity Mountain series. She writes these books under her other pen name, Willa Nash. So we have The Bribe, which is the first one, then The Bluff, and The Brazen. The Brazen is my favorite out of the bunch. I gave this book 4.5 stars, and it is a kind of enemies to lovers, but not really. Like, it's more situational. They had like a bad first impression of each other. She had a bad first impression of him, and I just really like the setup of the story. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Kerrigan, in this small town of Calamity, she's like an entrepreneur, and she wants to invest in real estate. She's been buying these older houses or older spaces and renovating them, converting them, trying to make them rental properties or just flipping them and selling them. And she actually had this mentor who was like a big guy in real estate and based out of Colorado. They had like a chance meeting years ago, and he actually invested in her. So he loaned her money. But recently he's died, and now his grandson, is it his grandson? Yeah, it's his grandson. Sorry, I was like, is that his dad? No, it was his grandson. Now his grandson has inherited his company, and guess what? He shows up in the small town of Montana, and he is calling in the debt in full. And Kerrigan's like, I cannot pay that. I don't have that much cash. And he's just like, it's not my fucking problem. So she hates him for this because she's just trying to follow her dream. Her parents kind of think that she's a little bit dumb for trying to do this. Like, they want her to come work for their business. They have a car dealership that like basically all the family works in, and they're just kind of like, oh, you don't understand why you want to struggle and do this type of thing. Like, you could have this job. But she misses her mentor so much. But we find out that Pierce actually has a very complicated relationship with his grandfather. He basically is just kind of like, you have stars in your eyes when it comes to my grandfather, but like, he's not the great guy that you think he is. And she just kind of like is shocked by Pierce's attitude. But oh boy, there's a snowed in scene. Nothing like a good forced proximity situation to change your mind about somebody. And there's just so much more. There's a revelation about Pierce's past. There's something that he's currently going through that ends up by being, it's not a third act conflict. It's more like a middle of the book conflict that I kind of really preferred. I really do prefer emotional relationship type conflicts to happen more towards the middle of the book, because it really gives the couple time to overcome that in a realistic way, and it doesn't feel forced or rushed, because this was kind of like a big thing to get over. So like the second half of the book is really kind of like a big grovel scene. It's really good. Anyway, I enjoyed this book the most out of the whole series. The Bribe, the first one, was also really good. It definitely has like the lightest feel out of all of them. The storyline feels the lightest, even though the heroine is a country music star who she's escaping Nashville because she has a stalker. So that's kind of dark, but the playfulness between the two MCs is awesome. So there's like a little bit of a secret identity when it comes to the heroine, because when she first meets the hero in a chance meeting while she's hiking, she gives him a false name. She doesn't want people to know who she is. She's obviously hiding from a stalker. And they just so happen to run into each other when she moves to his small town. He's a sheriff over there, and she's a new resident. And when he pulls her over for speeding, he sees her real name, and he's just like, you gave me a fake name. What? And also, I recognize your name now. So I just really liked this couple. They were just really cute. Very low angst between themselves. And I liked it. So it was very enjoyable. Now the bluff I liked the least. It's a marriage of convenience trope, and I actually really like the reason why Everly and Hux get married. It's because Hux has a young daughter and his ex-wife is horrible and wants to keep the daughter like away from him. She's always running away from home to try to be with Hux and stuff, and he's trying to change their custody agreement and he's taking her to court. One of the biggest things that is not in Hux's favor is that he has been to jail. And also he's unmarried. And so Everly comes up with the idea that, hey, we should get married because it'll look better on paper and you can get your daughter, like custody of your daughter. And I actually really liked the beginning of this book, but the conflict between the two was just not it. It just wasn't it for me. I didn't really enjoy the way that he was pushing her away. There was this other character that Hux wanted to see like the best in, but it was pretty obvious that this person was hiding something and he was just being blind to this person's actions and the way that she was treating Everly. So it just was not my favorite of the bunch. So yeah, overall, I like this series. Oh, and I also read The Bully, which I don't have the physical copy to. That's the last book that I read, and that one's more like an enemies to lovers, also like a friends with benefits type of situation that's been going on for years. And that one was okay, but it was a little forgettable, honestly. But I did like Cal and Nellie, who are the characters in The Bully, better than I liked Everly and Hux. Okay, in the next, I read The Crush on my way to a Polycon. So Juliet and I were supposed to be buddy reading The Crush by Carla Sorensen, and we both started reading it on our flights to a Polycon, started at the exact same time. And when we landed in DC, I was 80% of the way through the book and Juliet was like 35% of the way through. So I was terrible at buddy reading with Juliet. I should have checked in with her and checked on her progress so that we could discuss it. But yeah, so that didn't happen. I flew through The Crush because I just really love Carla Sorensen's writing. She's fast becoming one of my favorite authors. I've talked about her a bunch on my channel. And this is like a next generation from her Washington Wolves series. And it's the final book that's going to be part of this spin-off generational series. Emmett Ward is the only son of the couple from The Marriage Effect, which is one of my favorite books by Carla Sorensen. So I was really excited to see their son. This is also kind of like a second chance romance between Emmett and Adeline. Adeline had always had a crush on him, and this is also like a brother's best friend type of romance because Emmett is really good friends with her brother. They're both playing football and stuff. And Emmett comes to like this epiphany that at the end of the day, he could be injured while he's playing football. He has like nobody by his side. Like he thought that he could not have a relationship and a successful, thriving career. He's so focused, like that's just the type of character that he is. He's so focused that he felt like he needed to put all of his energy in one thing or the other. So when Adeline had expressed an interest in him years ago, he kind of was just kind of like, it can't work because all my focus needs to be in football. But after one of his teammates gets injured and he sees like the wife and the daughter, you know, waiting to hear news of, is he going to be permanently paralyzed? Like what's going to happen? What's our future going to look like? He has this epiphany that he needs to try it with Adeline. And I love how his best friend, who's Adeline's brother, is kind of like, well, I wasn't going to tell you this, but she recently broke up with her boyfriend. But she had been in a relationship for a couple of years, and so he's like, maybe you don't go after her just yet. Like, let her breathe. And it is kind of a little bit of a slow burn in some situations because he does go after her, but it's not like they're immediately together. She has a little bit of trust issues when it comes to Emmett. She doesn't want to get her hopes up because she let herself down by being so invested in him in the first place, and nothing ever came of it. So she doesn't want to get her hopes up again. So Emmett really has to prove himself, like this is what he wants to her, and I really loved it. It was also a little bit sad because her stepdad, the patriarch of the Wilders, he has been fighting battles with cancer multiple times, and it's back and it is terminal. And so that was like a really sad thing to go through. But their family is just so fucking beautiful. So anyway, the reason why I like bring up the whole Wilder family, Adeline Wilder's family, is because Carla Sorensen's next series, her next spinoff is going to be about the Wilders. So we're going to see more of their siblings. I knew the second that the siblings were introduced in the plan because that hero, Eric, is the oldest brother of this like blended family. I knew that this family was going to be the next project that Carla Sorensen was going to tackle. And she even like says in her author's note, she likes it best when she gets to write about like families. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what we're going to get with the Wilders. I'm very happy to be with them again because we've already had 2 Wilders as characters in the book, but there's many more Wilders that need their HEA. Then I read the redo on my way back from ApollyCon, and I really loved it. It's been a while since I've read a Max Monroe. Not all Max Monroes do it for me. Sometimes I feel like they could be a little bit over the top and I don't really love it, but oh my god, I loved the redo. So this is the final book in the Winslow Brothers series, but I feel like it's read very well as a standalone. I hadn't read any of the other books at all, and I fell so deeply in love with these characters. The hero's name is Remy, and he is this, I think he's in his early 40s. When he was younger, for his like bachelor trip, he and his brothers had drunkenly gone to this psychic, and the psychic basically told Remy, like, you're not gonna marry your fiance. And she actually like calls off the wedding and they never get married, okay? So he has been, you know, pushing everybody away like romantically since then. He doesn't trust people, of course. His siblings have slowly started to settle down, and he's actually kept in touch with the psychic, funnily enough. And I kind of really like their relationship, the relationship between Remy and the psychic. I thought it was pretty funny. But the psychic basically says like, eventually you're gonna open yourself up again to love. And he's just like, absolutely not. Nope. And this is a second chance romance between Remy and his high school sweetheart, Maria. He runs into her in the elevator. She's trying to show this property because she's a real estate agent to one of her clients, and the elevator breaks down and puts them in the same elevator together. And they realize like, oh my god, we haven't seen each other in like a decade or more, much more than a decade. 2 decades, 20 years? I don't know. Currently, Maria is like 8 months pregnant, okay? And Maria is actually the surrogate carrier for her sister. Tragically, her sister and her husband have passed away. So technically, you know, Maria is the guardian of this baby. And she really never saw herself settling down and having kids. So this is like a big change for her to go from just being the aunt of this baby that she's going to bring into the world. She was just going to be the fun aunt, you know, to her sister who is very maternal, very much wanted to have babies. And she has to be a mom now. So I really like the reconnection between her and Remy. And I love how Remy is so supportive of Maria throughout the entire book. Like, he is just there when she needs it. She has a very difficult time asking for help, and Remy just kind of like, you can rely on me. Like, if you need, I know we haven't seen each other in a long time, but if you need something, ask me. And I love it. So they're actually thrown into this stuck in an elevator situation twice, and it's really funny, but it kind of plays into the whole, you know, psychic element of it, which I thought was fun. But oh my god, Remy is such a hot dad figure. I loved his relationship with baby Izzy. There was a scene where he and his brother, who his brother has twins, they were watching, like, he was watching the baby Izzy so that Maria could be a girl boss and go get her shit done, her job, all squared away. And he and his brother were going to go to the library, but apparently reading time, they went there at the wrong time. So there's a local like carnival that they go to, and that was one of my favorite scenes, hands down. It was so funny. It was so great. I loved it. Remy, oh my god, I just love him. It was like this dad competition at the carnival. It was hilarious. Okay, anyway, it was just really fun. I really enjoyed it. 4.5 stars. Love. Then I have another Devaney Perry. I didn't realize I read so many Devaney Perrys during the month of July, but I really went for it, okay? I've been reading the Lark Cove series on Anyplay, and I haven't loved the Lark Cove series overall. They haven't been terrible, but also not memorable until Tragic. I love Tragic. I thought that was the strongest book out of the series. It was really fun. It has some enemies to lovers vibes. They're also neighbors, Kane and Piper. Piper is the assistant to the hero in book 1, and she's moving away from New York because she's just gotten out of a long-term relationship. She is finally doing things for herself, and she decides to renovate this old cabin because it's very mid-century modern, and that's not really her. So she's like gutting the entire thing. Well, Kane, who owns the log cabin on the property next to hers, does not like the racket, and she's actually living in this little Airstream trailer on the property, and he like frequently comes over to like complain about the noise and stuff. And their relationship happens backward, and they actually talk about that because they kind of bang it out. Like one day he comes to yell at her about like the noise and about like the trash kind of being on his property, which it wasn't, and they're just like so frustrated, and then all of a sudden they like bang it out like towards the beginning of the book. I really love the way that the feelings were developing in this novel. It was just a fun time. I just really enjoyed that one, so definitely my favorite. Okay, I think I've done enough talking. This is going to be a long enough July wrap up. I did not mention every single book that I read during July. I did do some rereads, and there were some other books that I just didn't feel like they were really as memorable as these were, for a positive or a negative reason. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. And if you liked it, give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.